My name is Judy Friedlander, and I have to say I'm not an adjunct professor, but close. No, that's all right. I'll take it. It's fine. Adjunct fellow. I have no idea what the difference is, but anyway, I just needed to clarify that as well. And I'm also the CEO and founder of PlantingSeeds. Now, PlantingSeeds' flagship program is the B&B Highway. It's been operating for quite a few years now. And so as you can see from this beautiful graphic, that it incorporates a lot of bees, beds and breakfasts for birds and bees and biodiversity. And as it turns out, a lot of pollinators, which is what we focus on, and what we're losing, which we know we're losing pollinators, start with B. So there's bees, birds, bats, butterflies, lots of different, not all pollinators start with B, but as it turns out, it's just a neat way that we convey the information. So this one, that one, that one, maybe that one, maybe. I thought it should be on, you think, click. No. What about share? No, because we haven't got this binding.
Okay. Well, you want
to know what I can do? How about if we go this one? That will work. Can everyone see that? No?
Are you trying to...
We might have to go with the, sorry, folks, while we're adjusting all that, I will explain what the B&B Highway is about. As I said, it's our flagship program, and we focus on pollinators, which is what we are losing. A lot of people seem to the loss of European bees. Are you aware of the loss of European bees? And a lot of people have heard about the varroa mite, but we are about a lot more. So we tend to go into schools, but not just schools. We started with 5 B&Bs in the eastern suburbs of Sydney about 3.5 years ago, and we're now in 130 schools and corporates and community centres in 3 states, and we're growing. So it's basically getting momentum, which is terrific. Oh, thank you so much. It works now to the so right. This that one, yeah. Fantastic. I know that there's been acknowledgement of country as well, which is important. So thank you for doing that. So as I mentioned, we started off with a few, and now we are in many more. So I'm not here to talk about my research. My PhD research actually is a little bit different. My background's journalism and media, and I've worked as an environmental journalist and a general journalist, a feature writer and editor. I've worked in television and newspapers, and for a long time I was getting very concerned that people weren't understanding or learning or reacting or aware of what was happening with environmental news. So I do remember in the late 80s being invited to dinner parties and being basically told to leave because I was depressing everyone, because I'd say, look, you know, there's this thing called global warming, and all the researchers and the scientists are estimating that we're going to have real problems if we don't do something. And so part of the reason for me going back to study was that I really wanted to try and understand, how do you engage people with this really difficult, inconvenient message? So that was my PhD research. And I jokingly say that my 8 years of research can be summed up by one sentence, which is in a way what the B&B Highway is about, which is you have to give people the facts, but if that's all you do, it's not going to work. You also have to give people positive, practical and scalable actions. So they have to feel that what they're doing is practical, that they're walking the talk, and that also that they're connecting to something that is bigger than them, because we're all aware that it's a huge problem. And so just with that as a background and as a preface, that really conveys what this issue is about. So the B&B Highway is essentially targeting biodiversity, which of course has impacts on the urban heat island effect and climate change. And the idea is that we are aiming to regenerate the urban environment. So 95% of us live in urban environments in this country. A lot of people don't realise that a huge percentage of significant plants and animals are in urban areas. People often think that when we regenerate that we need to focus on regional areas or the country or bushland, but actually we can do a lot to help and support. and also create what's called the spillover effect as well. So I will go into the next slide now. We have a lot of collaboration, so it's really important, of course, as I was saying before, that people feel confident that everything is evidence-based. So everything we do is backed by solid research. So we've actually developed curriculum and resources with the Department of Education in New South Wales for national use, and now we work closely with Environment Education Victoria, the Office of the Chief Scientist in a number of states and nationally, and other departments as well. And I'm going to go into our work with citizen science a bit later, because that's really key and instrumental to how we and how everyone can help biodiversity. And I'm finding, or we do find, that a lot of people are very unfamiliar with citizen science and how easy it is and how practical it is. And we've recently been taken on by the Landscape Foundation of Australia, which is very exciting. They're an organisation that's been set up by the ex-heads of the Australian Institute for Landscape Architects, a number of emeritus professors. And so they've taken us on as one of their 3 key not-for-profit environmental organisations, and helping us when we go in and plan our landscapes in schools and corporates, etc. We've recently started working with corporates. It's been a really interesting journey. I know I'm not here to talk about the whole history of the organisation, but it's got relevance for what I'm about to say as well. But we have discovered that the only way that we can truly scale and generate and regenerate more and create more effective corridors is by corporates jumping on and helping us. And we're finding that increasingly a lot of big companies are aware of what's happening with biodiversity loss. There's it's interesting. I don't know if you've heard of the nature repair market. Has anyone heard of the nature repair market? Well, you will in the next few years. So we've heard of carbon credits. Biodiversity credits is something that is now being bandied about and discussed, and it will be implemented probably in the coming years. And in Europe, a lot of companies are already expected to actually work with biodiversity credits. And what we're finding is that a lot of Australian companies are now being expected to follow suit. The Australian arms of the European companies, or the subsidiaries, are being expected to follow suit. So they're coming to us and saying, how can you help us regenerate and help biodiversity? And that's what we're offering. So I've mentioned that the key concepts of what we do, it's very evidence-based. We work with universities. It's ground up because we work with our communities, but also top down. It's really important that everything is basically grounded, or not grounded, but informed by proper research as well. At this stage, we have, 140 B&Bs installed or in planning in 3 states, many habitats installed. I'll be talking about habitats and what they are in terms of constructed habitats, 6,000 plus plants and over 6,000 students. So I spoke earlier about losing pollinators. As it turned out, coincidentally, when we launched the B&B Highway, it happened to be the very, very week that this massive study came out that was European-based, which talked about the loss of pollinators, this massive loss of pollinators. It was a few years ago. So it wasn't fortunate, of course, for us, for anyone, but it was fortunate for our timing, because the media was looking for an initiative that they could talk about that would support the loss of pollinators. And it's been quite a journey. And what we learn is we go into schools or we go into corporates with this beautiful illustration, and we talk about the concept of biodiversity. And invariably, we discover that most people are aware of bee loss, but they associate bees with European bee. And it's complete news to them that there are 1,600 plus types of native bees. There's thousands of types of flies and butterflies and dragonflies and hoverflies and many other mammals, even lizards that help with pollination that people aren't aware of. And we do know that we are losing a lot of them. So I guess for everyone watching this, a lot of you are very familiar with the term biodiversity, but it's very interesting when you start drilling down and making yourself aware of what is around you, that you realise that we just don't have that in our urban environment, and it's something that we can achieve. So we talk about the 3 tiers. We talk about how important it is to have the ground cover and to have the mid cover and the trees, and to talk about the variety of colours, and to talk about all the different types of species. So this is a lovely interactive exercise when we go into schools and we say to the children, what can you see? And they start looking and they realise that there are birds and that there are hollows, and then that opens up the conversation about it takes 100 years for a hollow to form. So what's happening if we're cutting down trees that are old as well? We always talk about constructed habitat, and that's a way of helping, but we always say that it's most important to plant and to keep the trees as well. That's much more important than the constructed habitat. We talk about water supplies. We talk about all the different insects that are responsible for pollination. Not this evening, we also then talk about all the links to food. So I don't know if you're aware of the statistic. It's actually an academic statistic that says that 1 in 3 bites of food are connected to pollinators. Are you familiar with that? So it's a lot. So it's not to say, a lot of people seem to have heard of this Einstein quote that apparently was not attributed at all to him, but everyone seems to know it, that, you know, if you lose the bees, then we've got 3 days and that's it. Apparently he never said it, but it sounds very dramatic. It would mean if we lost our pollinators, or many of our pollinators, that we would have a very limited diet, and there is no doubt that our nutrition would be affected, and all sorts of course, follow-ons. We don't want to get to that point. And as I said earlier, it's amazing what we can do in an urban context. The research is supporting that. So it's really impossible to, run through a list of everything you should plant. A lot of people live in units. A lot of people might live in a larger home with a garden. A lot of people might work with a community garden, but there are incredible resources. And later on, I'll be going through some resources that are relevant to this area and some places where you can go to find out what to plant. We often feature the native stingless bee called the Tetragonula carbonaria. Has anyone heard of the Tetragonula carbonaria? Have you heard about, do you know anyone who actually keeps stingless bees? No one does here? Okay, it's interesting. So I have actually a lot of stingless bees at home, and when people see it, they say, but they're not bees. And I said, well, they are. And there's a wonderful graph that, again, I could talk for a long time and show lots of beautiful images, but let's do this. That shows all the different native bees that we have in Australia. So as I said, there are 1,600. So the European bee was only introduced in I think it was 1860. Prior to that, Australian plants did very well, thank you, with all the other insects that were around to pollinate as well. There's some really amazing research now that's showing that our native bees are able to pollinate a lot of European crops, that they can pollinate tomatoes, that they can pollinate eggplants, and all sorts of things. The blue-banded bee. Has anyone seen a blue-banded bee? Okay. I've got a fantastic video to show you of a blue-banded bee. They're called the headbangers of the insect kingdom, because I think they bang their head 300 and something times a second in order to get the pollen. But more on that later. So the Tetragonula carbonaria bee looks like a fly, and it's smaller than my little fingernail, and they live inside a hive and they make honey, and they live in Sydney. And people don't realise that we have all these bees that can actually live in hives, native bees that live in hives and can actually make honey. They don't make as much honey as a European bee, but we're not really talking about rearing bees for us. We're talking about helping biodiversity in the ecosystem and helping our vegetation. It's just starting now. We have a lot of young students, masters, PhD, undergraduate students who are coming to us, which is very reassuring. And a lot of them are doing research into bees, which is interesting. And so, in fact, we have this fantastic PhD student who basically was just looking into the male Tetragonula carbonaria and how far it can travel. And he was astounding us with its facts. And then they've just found someone else who works with us in Melbourne, has found that the blue-banded bee is responsible in Melbourne for pollinating a lot of native vegetation in Melbourne. So this is why we really need to understand the basics, which a lot of us don't, and the research is not there. So we're in the inner west, so it's opportune, illustrates what we're talking about by considering what was natural to this area before we came along. So we have the sandstone slopes, we have the turpentine ironbark forests, and also wetlands in this area. So when you're going to purchase plants, it's not always easy, of course, to purchase a tree, but it's important to consider how you can contribute to that natural ecosystem as well. And there's a list of local nurseries, but of course, for people who are watching who aren't from the inner west, of course, there are many different local nurseries. We often talk about Indigigro. I don't know if anyone's heard of Indigigro, I should say. It's an Indigenous nursery that's based in La Perouse, and they basically cultivate the eastern Banksia scrub, which of course is a very important part of our vegetation in Sydney, and they have incredible wealth of knowledge. So if you're looking to purchase some fantastic native plants, it's well worth the trip. And here we can share this information with you too, some suggested ground covers and shrubs and trees and climbers that are helpful. Earlier, I was talking about the blue-banded bee, which of course is one of many, many bees in Australia. And there are also many other insects. So the blue-banded bee is just one of many pollinating insects that relies on clay and sand to live in. So when we go into schools as well, we say, when you look around, can you see a lot of natural clay? What can you see? And of course, children they become aware that they're seeing concrete and asphalt and everything else. And then we basically need to convey that it's important when we are creating a garden or thinking about regenerating, that we also include some clay, some just natural landscape and landforms, because it's a very important part of habitat for many, many insects, thousands and thousands of insects as well. I will be going into an example of how to help particular ground-dwelling insects soon, but when we go into schools and corporates, we will offer one of these particular types of habitat. So I talked earlier about the Tetragonula carbonaria bee. So that hive on the left is something that we often put into schools. And it's just a source of incredible fascination for so many people who suddenly become aware of this incredible bee. There's lots of amazing facts like, when it's 18 degrees, because that's when they pop their little heads out to see what's happening, because they won't come out unless it's 18 degrees. We explain to them that they come back with the pollen that they carry in their little back legs. So it's, the kids get really interested and start looking with their magnifying glasses to see if they can see the pollen. Once a year or every 18 months, we split the hive. Is anyone aware of splitting? Yeah, so look, if you're interested, it's just an incredible hobby, and it's a great way to help and support native pollinators by actually hosting a hive and having a hive. They're not cheap, but what we do is with schools is we split it. We ensure that there's a queen. It's similar to European bee in the part that we a princess, that is, that we're taking or leaving behind. Should know that, and then. we seal it up and then we put in another half and then we take it to another school and we call that paying it forward. And the kids love the whole process and looking inside. We give them a taste of the honey as well. And the TC, I'll call it, hive, I don't know if you've seen, and inside it's most extraordinary, beautiful spiral formation that is quite unique in the animal kingdom. And then we also have been helping the microbat population. So a lot of people are very unfamiliar with microbats as well. They're incredibly important for our native vegetation. They're tiny. People wouldn't see them. They fly around at night and they're very much threatened. And we are putting them into B&Bs, and we work with organisations like Taronga Zoo. We consulted the microbat expert who the latest research pointed out that they actually like to live together, like in apartment blocks. So they have their own, but they like safety in numbers. There's no point just putting one box in. So we've been putting 5 or more. You might have seen a lot of the time commercial insect hotels from shops as well. They can be okay, but they're often treated timber. I wouldn't recommend them. They're very easy. It's very easy to make your own. I think when this whole craze started, there were these massive things that you would see that were more like art forms or artworks, but they actually aren't particularly effective because they attract a lot of predators and a lot of different insects. So I wouldn't recommend that. It's better to focus on the small ones. And of course, nesting boxes. We've had Forestry New South Wales donated $20,000 worth of timber to us 2 years ago. And if anyone's involved with a shed, a men's or a women's shed, and you're interested in timber, there is timber going. I believe it's very difficult to source. And so the arrangement we have with forestry is that people can use it to construct nesting boxes, and they're welcome to use for their own purposes as well at the sheds, which normally work for communities. So that's something worth, if you're interested in getting in contact with me. So now I'm going to talk about the Australian blue-banded bee, because it's just an example of just one of these, as I said, 1,600 pollinators that we can help. And as I said, there's an amazing research now that is looking into how the blue-banded bee is helping with crop pollination and can be even more effective than the European bee. So they're working with the blue-banded bee with pollination of tomatoes and, as I said, eggplants and a whole range of vegetables. And they are also vitally important for native vegetation. They live in every state of Australia except for Tasmania. So as I said, they like shallow, dry clay soil. They live in a village style. They're very beautiful. And they're quite large. And once you start looking for them, you will see them. But if you've got like a sandstone wall somewhere, quite often they'll like to live in that vicinity. Now, there is a video that I'm hoping. Oh, no, firstly, so as part of what we do with the B&B Highway, and I didn't actually mention the process, and I'm going into this because if you are interested in your local school, if you've got a connection with a school and you'd like the school to have a B&B Highway, please talk to me. Or if you'd like to support and help the children, we're often looking for supporters, but you have to have a working with children's tech. So what we do is we go into the school, we talk about local biodiversity, and we do all the research. What is local and native and endemic? It's important to teach that when we talk about biodiversity, we're not talking about one size fits all. We're talking about not just temperate, not just Sydney or not just Melbourne, not just Bathurst, wherever it is. We're talking about very specific. There are specific, often endemic, threatened and native plants and pollinators that live in that area. We do a deep dive, and it's fascinating to a lot of people to learn the extent of the biodiversity. And then we go outside and we do a bug hunt or a biodiversity hunt with these beautiful sheets, and kids get very excited, as adults do when we do it with them. And then the next one, we talk about plants. Now, you'd be surprised how few children have planted a plant. They get very nervous about it. We explain what to do, how to extract the plant from the tube stock, and they get very excited by that too. Just the basic, just developing confidence and getting rid of that notion that dirt is dirty and yucky, and it's actually very healthy for us as researchers find it. And then the next session, we actually reuse the tube stock containers and mix clay and sand together to form these homes for blue-banded bees. And it's a very popular activity. And then we explained that they need to be set in groups, and it's a lovely activity if you're looking for something to do with children or grandchildren as well. I love this little effect here, just putting it in this type of structure and or just basically locating them on top of one another. And then once they're in position, the male bees like hanging around and to take advantage, and you'll often see 10 to 20 male bees, as long as you've got some sort of vegetation hanging over the structures for the female bees where they're laying their eggs. The male bees will often hang around about 20 on a overhanging fern or whatever, or plant. It's very, very cute to watch. So there's there. Now, I'm hoping that's okay. Okay, so now we're going to move on to citizen science. Why is citizen science relevant to our discussion? Firstly, anyone sitting here today, have you heard of citizen science? Nodding heads. Has anyone got iNaturalist on their phone or their smart device? Anyone put your hand up, please, if you've got it? Okay, no one here. Has anyone heard of the Atlas of Living Australia? No. Okay. Well, that's the typical starting point. And it's really extraordinary because I often will call schools and talk to the head of science at high schools, and they haven't heard of it, of citizen science, and which is understandable because it's a fairly new area. And contrary to the term citizen science, it's actually science that's not run or organised by citizens. It's been traditionally something that scientists have done. So it's only now that the everyday person is getting involved. And every environmental report that you read, practically every academic research article I read about biodiversity will say at the end, the conclusion, we need more data, we need more citizen scientists. Now, what's happened over the last 10 years or so is that technology has improved at such an extent, and the photographic capabilities have improved at such an extent with the smart devices that the observation and the photo uploaded to a database is basically almost as good as the professionals. In fact, there's been a study that's shown us 87% as good. So your observation, the photo that you take, that you upload to a international database such as iNaturalist, is vitally important and can help inform research. So every report I read is saying we need more data. So the next slide will explain why. Only 30% of Australia's species have been formally named. That's not high. So the interesting thing too, when people say to me, oh, what can we help? Which insects can we help? Well, the answer is we actually don't know, because we do not know the status of most of our insects. Now, I was chatting to the head of data at CSIRO, head of biodiversity data, and he gets very excited by what we're doing because he said we need data sets that are repeatable. And later on, I'll just quickly talk about what we run. We started this thing last year called the National School Citizen Science BioBlitz. Have you heard of a BioBlitz? It's basically an event where people go and take observations and upload them. And so we run it in September in Biodiversity Month. And what we're aiming to do is repeat every year so that we can see what's happening. And also it actually tells you that if you've planted something, how it actually helps. But what we also don't know is we don't have observations of things like insects on plants. So we actually don't know what they need and what they're drawing upon for their resources, for their pollen and for their nectar. Anyway, as I said earlier, we have a huge percentage of plants and animals of national significance that live in urban areas. So people think cities, why would, animals and plants live in cities? Well, I always say that we're an animal and we like these areas because normally the soils are more fertile and we have water supply, etc. And it's generally, advantageous to animals. Well, a lot of other animals do too. When I talk about animals, I'm talking about all animals, including insects, birds, reptiles, mammals, etc. And then, as I said, only 30% of our native species have been named. So what you can do as an everyday citizen is basically take some observations and upload them. Now, I wonder if I'm going to give you some examples. So I chatted to of young people who've discovered species. That sounds a bit far-fetched. Again, this fellow I was chatting to at the CSIRO said to me that he reckons that if you take enough photos, if you go out into the bush nearby, you'll discover a species. And so I stopped him. I said, hang on, can you just repeat that? Are you sure that's right? He said, yep. There are so many species that haven't been named and observed. So here are some examples. This 8-year-old young girl, Arabella, was in the Blue Mountains. She took an observation of an orchid. It hadn't been seen for 145 years. This young girl, I interviewed her, has been helping her mum and dad up in Brisbane with research on owls and seeing where they live and what they're eating. And in fact contributed to a journal article which makes her the youngest contributor. I think she was 6, I think, when it was published in Australia, youngest journal contributor. 14-year-old Luke here was cycling out in the suburbs of Canberra and took a photo of this beetle, hadn't been seen since 1955, was written up in the Canberra Times. So there's all these extraordinary stories. And once you start getting into iNaturalist, you'll start getting addicted. Now, I don't know whether this is going to help me, allow me to interact with iNaturalist and the Atlas of Living Australia. But in the meantime, I'll just explain that why another reason why I'm talking about citizen science is we're talking about how to help biodiversity and how to, what you can do in your own place. So yes, we need to plant. Yes, constructed habitat helps. But it's really important to also understand and learn what is native to your area. So in a minute also, I'll be going into how you can use the Atlas of Living Australia to explore your area and see what's been observed as well, what plants, what birds, what insects, etc. Now, when we are taking photos, and it can be done with your mobile phone, it can be done with your smart device. The key thing is, and we always say to people, don't take pictures of your cat or dog. This is all about wild organisms, no pictures of faces. So you can see it says turn location services on. So most people probably don't realise, but that's automatically on your device anyways. It's on, it's telling the internet where you're located and what time it is. And that type of information is very important for when you're uploading. It will automatically be included when you upload the observation. If you don't want it on, that's fine. And then when you upload the observation, you have to manually put it in, which sounds hard. It's not great, but it's, you know, it's doable. But it's better. So when you have iNaturalist on your device, and I can actually take you through it later if you want me to show. It's free. There's 170 million people around the world who use it now. Australia is one of the biggest users, and as I said, the Atlas of Living Australia, which is a CSIRO database, it's not really an app, is the node of iNaturalist. iNaturalist was started, I think, the National Geographic and the California Academy of Scientists. And it's a lot of apps that you might have heard of: Bird ID, Plant ID, Frog ID, there's thousands of them. They feed into iNaturalist. So you don't actually, I mean, you don't have to have lots of apps. You can just use iNaturalist as well. And then, so if you're uploading, say you see a plant or a flower, and you think, oh, what's that? And you take a photo of it. It's a good idea to take a photo from different angles. And then when you're actually uploading, you basically drag and drop into the one observation, because that's going to help the person who's identifying the observation. You might take a picture from the top, from underneath, the leaf structure, the flower structure. It's the same thing with, if you can get as many photos as possible. Now, then you're probably thinking, who's telling me what this species is? Now, you'd be amazed. It might take hours. It might take at the most a day or two. I've taken photos of lizards and plants and flowers, and then I've created an identity for myself on iNaturalist. I call myself Pollinator Protector, and I'll take a photo and upload it. on the iPhone, it just automatically goes. It's really easy. You don't have to do anything. And then within a day or two, people will start identifying it for you. And the reason for that is there's a lot of people around the world who are passionate about certain species, and it will ping on their system. Oh, someone's seen something that looks relevant to me. Again, I don't know whether this session is going to allow me to demonstrate, but when you actually upload an observation, it will ask you to identify it. So if you don't know what it is, it's fine. As long as you put in something like plant or animal or bird or anything really basic like that, so that the people who are actually assessing have got that alert on, and they'll be able to sift it and determine it. And copyright, don't start taking photos of other people's observations. So here is an example. So I just did a screenshot of, was it 1 kilometre radius of ash fields. So this is from the Atlas of Living Australia. So as I said, the observations in the Atlas of Living Australia are fed from iNaturalist. And then it's a two-way thing. And so what you can do is you can click on any of those little dots and it will tell you what that observation is, what was seen. It will actually then allow you, everything in iNaturalist is linked to Wikipedia. So then you can actually find out more about the species. Other information that you can get from iNaturalist is things like graphs, where else the species have been seen around the world or around Australia, or that type of thing. What's interesting is that I think I clicked on birds, that's right, because I was interested in seeing what the most commonly seen birds are. So that's no surprise, rainbow lorikeet. It's not to say that this accurately represents what is in Asheville, because a lot of people might take a photo of a lorikeet because it's pretty. It might be skewing the data, but it does give an indication of what's being observed as well. And, likewise, you can click on any of these here and do more research. And you can display records a 1 kilometre radius, a 5 kilometre radius, and even and broader as well. And then you can find out more information about each species. You can click on each species and it will, as I said, take you into the Wikipedia information about each one. Now, I'm just going to go back to here. I wonder if, I wonder if this is going to, oh, look, it might work. I think it may. No. Can I click, control, click. Okay, control. Here we go.
Okay, I don't know. You see, we have really bad internet reception here.
I've basically run through how to use it. iNaturalist. I thoroughly recommend that you download it. Yeah, that's fine. If you can show that one, it's fine.
I'm just sharing that
that's
PowerPoint, so we'll just share again as this.
You can shoot screen and then we'll drag it on.
If anybody wants to
Region.
the highway, you can find it at our website
And then
www.ps.org.au if you're seeking information. And anything I've talked about, I'm very happy to provide that information, and any guides. We have a lot of guides as well. If you live in this area, I can share the guides for the plants as well, and some information if you're interested in making homes for blue-banded bees. We can share all that too. Okay, so here we go. Terrific. So what am I
You have to use, sorry.
Thank you. And I can't use a keyboard.
Yeah, we can.
All right.
If you type, it should work. But
Let's
see. Just put it back. There
over
it is.
there.
No, it is there. And you want me to click in there for you to be able to search?
Yeah. Okay. So let's search Bondi.
Okay.
I can do that if you want.
Oh, yep, sure.
So here we go. Right, Bondi. Results per page. Actually, let's do here. Explore. Okay. So what's the address here? What street is it?
260 Liverpool Road.
Oh, I'll let you do Liverpool Road. Okay.
Oh, we can allow it to know your location. Do you want me to do that?
It's all right. So there we go. It's actually showing us our location. So what I wanted to do is maybe we can click on the magpie. Click on that.
Species profile.
Yep. Down, look, it just enables you. Look, there's so much. It's a bit difficult with this, but it just goes into all sorts of information. We can see it takes you to more information on the magpie. Its distribution. It can take you through to occurrence maps. Let me scroll down. Yeah, where it's been seen. Oh, look, there's just sounds it makes. And by the way, with iNaturalist too, you can upload sounds. It doesn't have to be images as well. So you can record sounds as well. I was going to go through iNaturalist, but you know what? I think I've gone through everything and explained. It is pretty cool. I don't know if you want to just perhaps go to iNaturalist. Maybe we can try that too. So that was the ALA.
Or if I just Google it, will that be?
Yeah.
No.
Has anyone heard of Seek? Seek by iNaturalist? When you start learning about, okay, so let's go into Explore, just up the top. Yep. Let's go into location Sydney. Just on the little top on the right, put location Sydney. And then would someone like to suggest a species? Shark, maybe? Sharks? Shark, Sydney. Anyway, while you're doing that, there's something called Seek by iNaturalist, and I finally understood the difference. When you can actually download both. iNaturalist and Seek by iNaturalist. And the beauty of Seek is that you don't need to upload it. It can actually tell you what the species is. So that's why people found it appealing. But it doesn't contribute to a database. But the problem with it, I have discovered, is that it's Northern Hemisphere based. So you might take a photo of something, of a plant, and it will tell you something that belongs to the Northern Hemisphere. So if ever someone tells you about Seek by iNaturalist, it's great. You don't need to upload the observation, it automatically tells you. Then, well, see, this is really cool. This is what's been saying here. Don't bother, just do iNaturalist. Okay, so look, it's worthwhile playing around once you, especially on your computer, just to see what's been observed in your local area. Australian cockroach, how surprising. There's just so much. Yeah, there you go. And if you scroll down, what else can you see? Here we go. Oh, I was going to say research grade and non-research grade. That if 2 or more professionals identify your species and feel that it is identifiable, it becomes research grade, which means you have officially contributed to data. So anyway, it's a bit of a segue for citizen science, but I just find that a lot of people have not heard of it, and it's something that the everyday person can do to really help biodiversity research, to augment the actual planting and the construction of habitat. And I really urge you to play around with it. and have fun and just start looking, you know, go home, do a search, look at both the Atlas of Living Australia and iNaturalist, play around with the Atlas of Living Australia and see what's been found in your local area. And then start contributing as well. So thank you. And I suppose, is there time for questions?
Yes, we'll take questions from the floor. Anyone, do you have a question? Yeah, yes, anyone?
My question is the photo of the beehive was in a tree branch. I don't have any big trees in my house. What would be an appropriate structure?
Okay, so you're interested in a tetragonula carbonara beehive. Okay, well, it will need to be orientated with some shade. It has to have some shade because it gets so hot in Sydney in summer. So you can put it on a pole, you can put it on a structure, but it would, you know, you'd need to be aware of some sort of branches or something nearby that gives it a bit of shade. It doesn't have to be a big tree. It can be a nice tall bush as well. And we've got a whole lot of tips as well as to where to position them.
And
the best idea is to do a search just on Tetragonula carbonaria, the native stingless bee. Have a look, there's a Queensland supplier as well, Tim Hurd. Just look up Australian native bees. So we don't supply because we basically supply to schools. So every time we get an extra hive, we pay it forward and we give it to other schools as well. One thing we're finding is that unfortunately, if we're positioning them too far out western Sydney, it just gets so hot in summer that it can be a bit risky for them. They survive right down to Bega, but it basically on the coast. Coastal area. That should be fine. We've just put in a whole lot in we've just done 13 schools in Parramatta actually. I should have brought one. Yeah, everyone's fascinated by these bees. They're about so big. They're about, what's it, half a metre? There's say again, sorry. Yeah, they live in the box. There's 10,000 bees, 5,000 to 10,000 bees live inside one of those hives as well. And it takes about a year to 18 months to replenish, to grow. And when you split it open, I wonder, I can probably do a search online. Maybe we can just do interior. Do you want me to? Go to Google and then I'll show you what it looks like inside because it really is beautiful. It's just extraordinary as well. So, and the other thing we say all the time is I think the TC bee can only fly, they say about 500 metres. And the male, so the guy who was doing the research for us was actually putting little paint on the males. I don't know how he did it, and measuring how far they were going. I don't know how he did it, but he actually somehow established that they can fly for 20 kilometres. But the females, who are the worker bees, 80% of the bees are the worker bees who are female in these hives. They go out and collect all the pollen, the honey. They can only fly 500 metres. So it's really important that you have the correct plants as well. One of the things that we love teaching children.
What did you look up, sorry?
Do you want me to do it? I'll do it. Is all the different colours that different insects can see and the different types of shaped flowers. Is that, I haven't looked up, is that working? No. Yeah, it is. Lit. And then and images. Yeah. Scroll down, keep going. Is that the best shot? Yeah, this one here. That's what it looks like inside. It's just extraordinary. So again, just the devil's in the detail. This is where I actually did a presentation at the Australian Native Bee conference. Was it last year? And my topic was the TCB as a charismatic insect. So we they talk about the panda bear, syndrome as well, charismatic megaspecies they're called in academia. Well, the bees are definitely the charismatic microspecies. And when Australians start learning about native species, they become really enthralled, which is great, because people like to learn. And there's so much to learn about each particular species. So, I mean, for example, I've learned that, the wax, which is analogous, I suppose, to the hexagonal, these little egg sacs, analogous to the European bee hexagon shape. The Australian TCB basically creates the structure with the round egg sacs. They're made of a combination of sap and the excretions from the bees. So when the bees go out on their journey, they have to find pollen. And pollen is protein. Did you know that? They have to find nectar. The nectar is their carbohydrates. And they need to find sap. And the sap is mixed with their own excretions to make this structure, which is interesting. And then what they do is it's very intricate. They create this beautiful structure here. And then all the nectar, there's sort of these deep wells of nectar and pollen. See all this yellow, that's all the pollen, and that is used to feed the little babies inside. And when you split it, you take half and then you basically put it into another hive and then propagate it, and so it goes on. There's so much to learn. I won't tell you what happens when the males end up impregnating the female, because it's not pleasant for the males.
That looks like a perfect example of Fibonacci.
Yes. Oh, yeah. I mean, that's fascinating. Absolutely, in nature. It's a totally unique structure. It's not seen in any other bee around the world. No. Look, I mean, think about your local area. I mean, as long as within 500 metres in your street, or the few streets that you can see a selection of plants. So, for example, we recently would put one on the library level at UTS, which is opposite, Central Park. And so we sort of figured that there's a few gardens nearby, and there's those hanging gardens, etc. And we've gone back, and that hive seems to be thriving. So as long as it's relatively close by, but certainly you can help them. So do you have a large garden, or is it a balcony? Or... Right. Well, you still have to find a place in your garden where there's a bit of sun. It needs to get the morning sun as well. Can't get too cold. Yeah.
Right. I've been could have been maybe before that. They move up. If I took a video,
Do iNaturalist? I actually don't know. That's a very good question, but you could probably, I'll find out. But I'm sure you could take a still from the video as well. I should know the answer.
I don't think that microphone's coming through, so maybe.
Oh, did you? Of a European beehive or a TCB? Oh, again, just look online. I mean, they're quite hard to get. I know, have you heard of Tim Hurd? He wrote the book, he wrote the Bible. No, but he'll send them. He'll send them. The bees, I think so. I think so, yeah. Yeah. Have you looked online to see? There are a few suppliers in Sydney. Yeah, there's Doug Purdy. No, I believe you can. Have you looked at Doug Purdy, Purdie? There's if you do a search, I think you'll find that you can get the bees. Yeah. I believe so. Doug Purdy, I think, is Sydney. I think that Doug Purdy is his name. I think so. Yeah. I haven't done it myself, but I have heard of other people who've actually ordered bees. Yeah. By the way, do you know what pollinates chocolate? It's one of the trivia questions we ask the kids. No. Does anyone know what pollinates cocoa, cacao?
People?
No. A fly. Flies are unheralded pollinators. Yep.
Can I ask a question? And I'm going to stand close to you because our audience online can't hear. So I'm using your microphone. When you split this,
PC.
yeah. So do they then recreate it into the same shape?
They do. They do. Yeah.
That's
Oh, they're
amazing.
incredible. It's been really such a highlight of this work to learn more about these incredible bees as well. But, you know, this is an example of a social bee. Most bees aren't social. Most bees are what they call solitary, which again is a bit of a misnomer. Like the blue banded bee, they say solitary, but it's still, all the females do like to live together in groups and then the males hang around. They just lay their individual eggs in solitary holes. But yeah, lots of nuances.
We do have some questions online.
Sure.
Which one?
Do you want to read them out?
Yeah, we'll try reading them.
Is this working? No? Sure. I might just come and stand close to you again.
There's one question here.
Okay. Can the native bees survive very close to the coast? I've got a lady who, or fellow, I'm not sure actually, who lives near the coast and they get very strong sea breezes.
Yes, they can. They can, as long they tend to live near the coast. I presume this person lives in Sydney. Do they live in Sydney? Is that a wrong assessment? Well, yes, no, that's fine. They can. If you live in Queensland or further north of Sydney, then there's another type of bee called the Tetragonula hawkinsea, I think is the pronunciation, which is similar. Newcastle, absolutely, yes, definitely, they can survive. Just, I think if it's interesting how interested people are in this bee. Look, as long as you consider that in winter when it's freezing cold, you know, you need to think about the fact they're getting some sun. In summer when it's very hot, that they have to have some sort of shelter and shade. You cannot move them. You can't say, oh, in winter I'm going to move them to another spot, because they still don't necessarily understand their navigation capabilities and how they do it. But they know where their hive is and you don't want to confuse them. Apparently you can move the hive, you know, like half a metre a week or something along those lines, but you don't really want to confuse them.
Okay, now I've got another question for you. Are the European bees aggressive towards native bees? And why is it that the European bees are so much more prevalent than native bees? Or is that just us, you know, not seeing them?
Okay, so the European bees, I suppose, are very, very prodigious, yes, and they were brought here in the 1800s to pollinate our crops, which a lot of the time, of course, aren't native. And because the European bee are traditional pollinators of the European food crops that we eat, or the American or whatever it is, or Asian, they tend to be very successful as well. The jury is out as to if they are harming numbers. Some people believe that because of limited natural habitat that the European bee is going to be more successful at taking things like natural hollows or logs. They like living in hollows in logs, rotting logs, hollows in trees, that type of thing. So there is that school of thought. But then, as I said, the jury is out. A lot of people believe that they can happily cohabitate. And in fact, at my house, I often see a European bee and a TC bee happily hovering over the same flower.
With actually towards the winter, but and the entrance to the hive is in the south. In summer, I want to rotate the So
You've done this or
I'm good.
you're thinking of doing it?
I'm good.
No, but how do you know that the rotation is going to work? Oh, you don't. You're asking me.
Can you repeat?
Okay, so the question is, if you then put in one of these hives for a TC, if you can rotate the entrance, is that right, in the different seasons? So, So this is an example of a very technical specific question, and this is what I meant. This is why I did a presentation on why the TC is a charismatic microspecies, because people are absolutely fascinated. There's a book I bought and I thoroughly recommend you purchase it. I still haven't finished it. It's by Tim Hurd, who's the father of TCs. Sorry? Is that information is not inside the book? Have you emailed him? He will tell you. No, he will tell you. My bet would be that you can do it, because they do say you can move it slightly, you know, so that would be my bet, but he is really amenable and open to people emailing him. Okay, well, email me and I'll give it to you.
I've got one other question. Why are there no blue-banded bees in Tasmania?
Oh, I don't know. That is a really good question. Would this person like to do a PhD in the subject? Honestly, be amazed the people that there's a woman that's helping us out, and her PhD was in bee vision.
Oh, wow.
In native bee vision, just a few species. So that's a really good question. I'm really sorry, I don't know the answer.
Do you have any tips for taking night photos for iNaturalist?
Okay. Well, I guess, well, we often talk about the night pollinators and the moths. We talk about the night shift and the bats and how they're really important. You can get special lights. But again, no one's asked me that. And thank you for alerting me to that question, because I've been asked to write a children's book on this topic and the whole what I've been talking about today. And that is a very good piece of information I'm going to put in as to how then you attach a camera to your.
Got me thinking that one.
I would actually suggest, I know not everything is rocket science. I would suggest something as simple as taking a torch with you. I think that's as simple as that.
And just a question from me, sorry. I'm actually allergic to European bees. Are there a lot of Australian bees that are stingless, or are they majority stinging bees? Or
The majority of bees they sting. And of course, a lot of insects do sting as well. But the TC bee doesn't. When we started going into schools a few years ago, it was really quite challenging to convince the schools that it was safe. Fortunately, the principals don't ask us that anymore. So we must, I think they're getting to know more about it. I always say to people that I grew up in Sydney. I was played in the bush and didn't have that. I mean, it's obviously it's a serious thing. I understand. I'm not diminishing. But
I was just trying to leave them.
Yeah.
I haven't been stung, touch wood, for about 15 years.
Yes. But yes, we try and get children over that sort of fear thing, which is one of the reasons why the TC is so helpful, because it gets them over their fear.
Oh, yes. This was the last one. So they live in the Verona mite red zone.
Varroa. It's okay. Yep, they do.
Varroa mite red zone. Isn't this a good opportunity to promote native bees to beekeepers who cannot keep European bees and help fund them to keep tetragonians?
PCs. Where do they live?
Instead,
Where do they live?
Well, just where, yeah. Sure. See if they come back to us. It doesn't say
Anyway, but yes, in fact, I've written about this very topic. The question, of course, is this not with the varroa mite, is this not a good opportunity to start encouraging the propagation of native bees? Yes, that's our whole argument, which is the fact that we've been so reliant on European bees. So, I mean, last year we kept saying, all the experts were saying, it's not a matter of if the varroa mite comes to Australia, it's a matter of when. So that was always the warning. And of course, now it's happened. So it's happened. We knew it was going to happen. We could only hold out for so long. And when you have only, monocultures and you have small numbers of species and you don't have biodiversity, this is what happens. And this is also part of our messaging and what we're trying to teach children. And we're trying to encourage it in their local, locales, is to have as much biodiversity as possible. The issue we're finding with the varroa mite is that they're putting in, is it fipronil poisoning to kill the varroa mite. And unfortunately, the concern is that the native bees will go to the hives and consume some of this. So I think I'd still suggest definitely putting in a TC hive.
They're in Port Stephens.
In Port Stephens. Could I ask them to email me? Because I'm actually going to ask Tim Hurd what he says. I like to consult the absolute experts in this before I give a categorical answer. Our philosophy has been to retain our hives where there's varroa, because we can't go in. It just doesn't make sense to go in and extract them all. And, so be it. If they die, they die. What can we do? We need to encourage more and more colonies. So my email, I don't know if it was shared, but it's either info@ps.org.au or Judy at ps.org.au. So JUDY at ps for plantingseeds.org.au. I'm very happy to. I'm always interested in these questions.
Share that slides with the by email. I think we might bring it to a close. So I'd like everyone to thank Judy for a very informative talk. I think it's inspired us all to go out and start observing and encouraging, the native species, because we need them more than ever. And anyway, thank you, Judy.
Pleasure.